Ensuring that your field operational leaders are motivated and rewarded effectively is crucial to driving performance and achieving business goals. Today, we will explore how to create competitive, fair, and performance-driven compensation packages that attract top talent and retain and empower your leaders to excel in their roles. And to do this, I'm pleased to welcome back Jeff Carmon. Jeff, good to see you once again.
Good to see you as always, Jeff.
Appreciate having you as our cleaning contractor expert. And I think this is going to be a good one because everyone wants to talk about how do you create these compensation packages that's not just about the money, but that really matters. So talk about that, Jeff. What key factors should companies consider when designing compensation packages for field operational leaders?
Yeah, and you said it right off the bat, and I want to reiterate it. The compensation for field leaders is so important because as our customer, that's our primary customer contact. And our customer contacts anticipate that there's going to be some turnover in the cleaner position. But if we can retain those field leaders, and that's who the customer sees on an ongoing basis, it really adds value to the customer. So I would say a compensation strategy for all team members is important, but field managers especially. So I would say this is I think a compensation strategy ought to have a base piece that is attractive enough to retain talent, but then also has an incentive piece that encourages team members or those field managers to do the right kinds of behaviors to create value for the customers and be a good steward of the company's resources. So those are the things just kind of as we start to talk about this is those are the things that go into a field leader compensation strategy.
So let's dig into that a little bit more. Let's talk about how companies can align their compensation strategies with performance metrics to create motivation beyond just the money. Because you just mentioned it, it has to be more than that. A purely transactional culture is just not going to be the best. What do you think?
So this is where it's important to, I believe it's important to bring in this incentive piece and maybe a commission as well to invite these field managers to come in and in a certain sense act like little owners of the company. And so I think a good incentive program encourages right behaviors. And so when I think about right behaviors, I go back to those things that we want that I talked about earlier, and that is retaining customers and also creating profitability or being a good steward of our resources. And so what we want to do is we want to create incentive programs around things like customer retainage or number of customer visits, which is a leading indicator for customer satisfaction or profitability or targets like labor to sales ratio. So labor is such an important uh, cost to us that we want to make sure that we're managing that well. Also, you can bring in things like employee satisfaction and employee turnover. So all of these are factors that say to a manager, I want to incentivize you for doing the right things to help us be successful as a business.
That all makes sense. Thank you for that. There's no episode that is complete without talking about the screw ups, the mistakes. So let's talk about
Yes.
that. Common
Yes.
mistakes that companies make when compensating their field leaders. What are they? How do they avoid them? Get into that for us.
Yeah, so I think probably right off the top is I think I see this often, and we've been guilty of this, is overcomplicating the incentive program. If it's an incentive program that nobody can understand, or there's a formula that's so dense and long that the field manager doesn't understand, it's a demotivator. And so I would say that's one. I would say that making the incentive, so we have targets that they have to reach. If the targets are too far out, and I know I hear, hey, I want to have targets that encourage them to do great things. But if it's too far out, this just becomes demotivating. If I can't achieve the targets that you've gotten, so I see that as a mistake. One another is creating an incentive program that's not equitable across all managers. And for example, if one of our metrics that we're going to compensate on is turnover, and I'm a field leader that has manufacturing facilities that just tend to have more turnover because of the environment, it's not really equitable across all levels. Two more things. I would say this. I think we all, including France, we fail to communicate to managers their total compensation package, which would include all of the funds that we're investing in them year over year to do the work. And so that's going to include things like 401k contributions and all that. I think it's good to communicate that to the field leaders so they see how much money we're invested. And then lastly, as it relates to the incentive, is to make sure that field managers are aware that we're sharing a portion of our company's profitability with you. And so when we win, you win, but don't set your household budget up on that. Set it up on the base compensation so that there doesn't become an entitlement mentality that creeps in. And we've seen that as well at Frantz Building Services.
Well, those are good issues to recognize, to address, and get in front of.
Mhm.
So what you're telling me, Jeff, is that if I work for your company, I don't need an algebra degree to figure out what that compensation package is.
That's right. That's right. It's plain and simple. Here's the
Good.
2 or 3 targets that we're trying to achieve, and they're tied to our strategies for the year, and it's pretty simple to understand.
All right. Good to know in case I need a job. I'll let you know.
That's right. That's right.
Let's talk about this balancing short-term incentives like bonuses. I mean, everyone likes a bonus. Maybe it's annually
Mhm.
with long-term compensation packages. How do you do that?
Yeah, this is a tough thing, and this is I'm going to make I'm going to make a statement. I have found, at least in our organization and the field managers that I've been in communication with, that most folks are mostly focused on, or most folks are focused on the cash compensation piece of the total compensation. But I do think it's wise when creating structure, when creating your salary structures, to build in some components for longevity and then some completion of certain things, certain development opportunities. And so I do think that's wise to, as you're moving through and creating your structure, that you compensate for those things or bring those into play.
Let's talk about non-monetary rewards, maybe career development opportunities, recognition programs. Here's a plaque for the wall, whatever that looks like, Jeff. Does that have a place in this?
It sure does, and we're just kind of scratching the surface with France Building Services, and so we've created, for lack of a better word, a leadership track, and we probably should come up with some good name for it. But it's a series of leadership development opportunities that these managers can do on their own time. And I think that's important, that they would do it on their own time to get ready for that next level. And so, I would mention that ISSA has some good leadership development opportunities. Elite BSC has some leadership opportunities, IICRC, all those organizations. So we've kind of created leadership tracks to say, do these things so that when it's time for a potential opportunity to advance in our company, that you've got most of the skills necessary to make that move. Certainly, there's some other things that I've mentioned, 401k contribute. Those are things that each company is going to have to go through. But I think this idea of creating opportunities to advance in the organization, and there's good old fashioned giving the plaques, patting on the back, just ongoing encouragement means a lot to these folks as well.
Yeah, it does mean a lot. And once you have that all in place, that name for your program, we'll talk about that on another episode. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. We will.
Okay, let's wrap it up, Jeff.
Yeah.
Final words of advice to share with those watching.
Yep. I would say this: there's no perfect compensation strategy. We've tweaked ours and messed around with ours, and I would say that in almost any compensation strategy, and I learned this over when I was a medical practice manager, there's going to be half that, in our case, there's going to be half the doctors who are happy with it and half not so happy. And we're going to find that in our business too. But that's not an excuse for not putting something in place. So I would encourage everybody to think through, together a good wage strategy for those folks, and then tweak that as needed. But don't tweak it so much that it swings any of those folks' annual income a lot, because they're paying bills and those kinds of things. If they're counting on $70,000, I wouldn't let that come off. I wouldn't let that come off target too far from there.